So over the last few weeks, I've been slowly working on the mix on one of my songs. Today, I'm gonna be walking you through the vocal mix on that song, talking about some of the things that worked really well, some of the things that didn't work so well, and show you what I was trying to do in order to try to get a really wide mix in my songs. Hopefully you'll be able to take away some tips and tricks that you can use in your songs to make your vocal mixes better. Let's jump in. So one of the things that I've really been working on and trying to improve in is getting a much wider sounding vocal mix. A lot of times I feel like my vocals seem a little more compressed in the middle and they don't sound as wide as what I hear on other tracks and other songs. So I've been really trying different things to figure out what I can do to make them sound wider and make them sound fuller and richer as a vocal track. So let me show you what I ended up with, and then I'm going to talk you through some of the different things that I did for each section of those vocals to try to give it that really wide sound. So let's listen. This is a pre-chorus section of a song of mine that I've been working on. So let me just let you listen to that really quickly. Love is a wrecking ball, shatters the lies that you think of it all, and it all comes down to lies that you all believe in. All right, so you got the basic gist of it. So there's a main lead vocal that's singing, and then it has a couple of backup vocals that are singing as well. So I'm gonna talk you through what I was doing on each one of these vocals, and then I'll walk you through exactly what I did on the actual mixing side. So I'm gonna come out here to the playlist and let you hear the main vocal track, which is this one. Love is a wrecking ball, shatters the lies that you think of it all, and it all comes down to lies that you all believe in. So to get that sound, what I ended up doing was, the first thing I did, which I talked about a little bit in one of my previous videos, was actually to do some basic EQ on this first vocal, just to try to get the sound that I wanted. You can see I bumped a couple of things in here, took out a couple of sections. So let me walk you through a little bit of what I was doing here. So I knocked out this around 300 hertz because that was a real muffled kind of sound to it. I added in a little bit around that 500 because it gave it a little boost to the bottom end, like the low mid side of my voice. And then I think I dipped just a little bit around 1,000 hertz because it was a little cutting through, a little piercing. And then the last thing that I did was bump up this section around 11,000, which is more like the breathiness of the voice. But I also made sure that I kept it pretty thin. So using this button down here, or this dial down here, I made sure that I was bringing it in a little bit so that it was not boosting this area down here, which is around like 5K, 6K. So that was the first thing, was doing some EQ on it. And then the next plugin was for using the Fruity Limiter, and I used the compression side of it. And all that I was really doing was just knocking off a couple of dB off of the vocal, just to even out the performance a little bit. So taking out places where it got really loud and just kind of chopping that off. I'm not doing any makeup gain on this one. It's simply there just to knock off some of those really tall peaks on the vocal. And the next one that's really doing a lot of the heavy lifting is the RVox. And this is where it's getting a lot of the volume back and making sure that it's poking into the front of the mix. So let me let you hear what this plugin is doing. So I'm gonna isolate this vocal. Let me turn off the reverb. And then turn everything off except for those three. So this is without RVox. Love is a wrecking ball, shatters a lot. Pretty dry. Turn RVox on. Love is a wrecking ball. Brings it up to the front a little bit more. And then the next plugin that I was using was this de-esser, and all that was really doing is catching those sibilant sounds, so like the T's and the S's and things that just sound really harsh, just taking away a little bit of that. So that's what this one's doing. Love is a wrecking ball, shatters the lies. So when you hear me say shh, the shatter piece is where it's taking away a lot of that extra sound. And then I did a little bit more sculpting on the sound with an EQ. So cutting out a little bit more and then adding just a touch, or actually just taking away stuff on this one. So one of the things that I tried was using this OTT plugin, and I was really just trying to give a little bit more edge to that lead vocal. I don't know that I would do this again, or I would have to just mess around with it a little bit more because I'm not as familiar with this plugin as I'd like to be to get the kind of results that I want to out of it. But again, I just dialed it really low and just tweaked a couple of things on it just to try to help it give a little bit more just edge to the vocal so it cut through a little bit more in the mix. And then the last thing that I was doing was this VC2A, which is a model of the LA2A compressor. And again, it was just doing a little bit of peak reduction and a little bit of making up the gain. And I really just thought that it added a little bit of body to the bottom end of the vocal. So here's without that one. Love is a wrecking ball. And then with it. Love is a wrecking ball. Super subtle, nothing crazy, but it just adds to it. So then the next piece that I was working on was it was a second take of the vocal. So it's this one right here. Love is a wrecking ball, shadows and lies that you think of it all, and it all comes down. Love. So what's happening there is it's just a single take, but the magic that's happening in this one is really this doubler plugin. So I'm knocking out the direct one, which would be the normal one in the middle, and I'm just making it make it into like two voices that are panned to the left and to the right. And so they're spread out and they're offset a little bit using this delay. And this is just the default setting on it. And what that does is just make it a little more stereo in your ears. And then really what I'm doing up front on that is cutting out a lot of the low end and then compressing it a little bit and de-essing it a lot harder than the main vocal, because I don't want those harsh sibilant sounds like the S's and the T's and other things to be coming from multiple vocals. I only want a little bit of that coming from that lead vocal, and then everything else I don't want to have that same sound coming from. And so that ends up giving this sound to everything. Love is a wrecking ball, shadows and lies that you think of it all, and it all comes down to lies that you all believe in. And honestly, this, I think, gives it the width that I was looking for, that I imagined in my mind was this doubler plugin. I think really helped give me that stereo image and offset it a little bit so it feels really wide. It gives a little bit of a phasing effect, I guess, because of the delays that are on each side since it's a similar vocal. But it just makes it sound a lot wider and a lot fuller than just the one vocal by itself. Love is a wrecking ball. Love is a wrecking ball. And then I just accentuated that width by adding in like a couple more harmonies. So I had a low one. Whoops, I have to unmute him first. Love is a wrecking ball. So, I mean, you can hear that these things don't sound good or great on their own. It really is just to add some extra layers and some flavor into it and add the width to the voice. So when you actually add those voices in, this is what it sounds like. Love is a wrecking ball, shadows and lies that you think of it all, and it all comes down to lies that you all believe in. So it just sounds a lot wider, and it sounds like there's more people singing just because I'm singing in different registers and I'm trying different things just to give it a little bit of a different feel. And the width on this was really accomplished by using just the pan functions out here. So I had two of them that were panned towards the left, two of them that were panned towards the right. And then all I'm doing on the mixing on these is, again, just really carving out that low end, carving out some of the middle side as well. I think I boosted just a little bit around that 500 range, and that just gave it a little bit of extra body on the low mid side. And then I gave it a little more breathiness up top by adding in this little peak around that 11 kilohertz area. And that just added, like I said, just added a little more breathiness to it. So some of the high end side of the vocals. And then again, the limiter is working a little bit harder because I wanted to be a more even performance on this one. So it's taking out a lot more of the peaks, a little bit more heavy compression. You'll see it here if I turn that on.
Love is a wrecking ball, shatters and lies that you think of it all.
And then this LA2A compressor style.
Love is a wrecking.
Just taking off a couple more sets of those peaks. And then the last thing that I did to really just give this some dimension to this vocal was to add in a couple of reverbs. So I put in a small reverb and like a really short reverb, and then I put in a plate reverb just to add a lot more depth to it. So when I add those things back in, or this is without it,
Love is a wrecking ball.
and this is with it.
Love is a wrecking ball, shatters and lies that you think of it all.
And that just gives it a little bit more depth. One of the other things that I realized that I did not do was connect in the background vocals into the reverbs or the delays or anything else to help give them a little bit more dimension. So that might be something that I would do again or work on, just to give that overall, all the vocals being in the same space and give it a little bit more of a cohesive feel, glue it together a little bit more. So that might be something that I would change the next time around. Well, hopefully that was helpful for you to be able to see a couple tips and tricks that you can use on your very next vocal mix to try to improve it. If you're a beginner, I know that this can feel really intimidating when you're starting out. So I created a free cheat sheet that you can use to guide you step by step through the process of getting started on a vocal mix. There's a link in the description below that you can check out if you want to download that. If you like this video, go ahead and click the like button. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you can get alerted every time I post a new video, and I will see you in the next round.